Migraines are a major problem for a lot of people. If you suffer with a migraine, you already know that. It causes you to miss work, it causes you to be decapacitated, you don't know. But for some people, migraines can last for days, for others for hours. The medications that are used to treat migraines cause lots of other types of side effects, including fatigue and nutritional deficiency. So if you struggle with migraines, pay close attention, because in this video, I'm going to talk about the 16 primary triggers for migraine headaches. And the good news is, these 16 triggers you can do something about, you can control. Okay, let's dive into trigger number 1. Nutritional deficiencies. Nutritional deficiencies are a very common cause of migraines. Now, in my experience, the top nutrient deficiencies I see triggering people's migraines, number 1 is magnesium. Number 2 is vitamin B12. Number 3 is vitamin B2. And number 4 is coenzyme Q10 or CoQ10. These 4 nutrients are very, very critical for normal brain function, normal neurological function, and very, very common. They're found in people that suffer with migraine headaches, and actually are oftentimes used as what are called migraine prophylactics, meaning they're used as a form of relief for people who suffer with migraines. So nutritional deficiency is very, very important to look at. Now, you can ask your doctor to run testing to investigate for nutritional deficiencies, and I would highly recommend that you ask your doctor to look at your intracellular levels of at least these 4 nutrients, and preferably more than that. You want to look at all the B vitamins. You also want to look at calcium. Calcium deficiency can be a migraine trigger as well. So have your doctor look at all the essential vitamins and minerals and measure them so that you can get a good idea for what you're lacking, what you're missing, and potentially help yourself overcome these migraines as a result of those deficits. Now, the second trigger for migraine headaches is hormone disruption. Now, a lot of you, women especially, are on birth control or on some type of estrogen replacement. It's a common drug. A lot of young girls get put on it because they have heavy periods. A lot of doctors today are recommending estrogen-based therapies so that women can skip their periods altogether. I can recall the commercials. There's no medical need to have a period, which is, in my opinion, poppycock. Women have a period for a reason. There's a normal order to your hormones and to your cycling of your hormones. So hormone disruption is a major cause. Too much estrogen can actually be a factor in contributing to migraine headaches. So can too much of certain neurotransmitters. Things like serotonin play a role in regulating headache and headache frequency and headache intensity. And a lot of people don't realize that serotonin, about 90% of it, is made in the GI tract, and what you eat matters. What you eat will affect how you produce serotonin and how your gut bacteria will produce serotonin. So don't underestimate the power of hormone imbalance to triggering your migraine headaches. If you suffer with migraines and your doctor hasn't measured your estrogen and your progesterone and other neurotransmitter hormones, might be a good idea to ask. The third trigger for migraine headaches is allergies. And when I say allergies, I'm talking about 2 different things here. So that really this could be the third and the fourth. It's food allergies, but it's also chemical responses or allergies to external or outdoor things. Things like ragweed or mold or dust or pollen. Those are common triggers. Now, additionally, foods can be common triggers. In my experience, one of the most common food triggers to triggering a migraine headache is gluten, or the proteins found in grain, the gluten-based proteins. Now, other people react or find that dairy is a common trigger. Some people find that processed sugar is a common trigger as well from the food perspective. So a number of different foods. What's the takeaway here? You can ask your doctor to measure you for food allergies and for environmental allergies, and do your best to protect yourself from that onslaught of those problems by changing your diet and potentially staying indoors on days where allergy counts are high. Okay, that brings us to trigger number 4 here, which is gluten. Now, gluten can be part of that food category, right? But gluten by itself, gluten is a known neurotoxin. So even beyond its activity of triggering an immunological allergic response, gluten can actually trigger nerve damage. There are a number of research studies showing that gluten acts as a neurotoxin, can cause white matter lesions in the brain, can create neurological disruption both through the gut and the brain, so the head and the gut, your second brain, so to speak. So testing for gluten sensitivity is a very, very important thing. If you're struggling with migraines and you've not been properly tested, I recommend genetic testing. Below this video, I'll put a link up where you can get genetically tested. If your doctor refuses to run that type of testing on you, you can do it online. All right, trigger number 5. Trigger number 5 is alcohol. A lot of people kind of glaze or gloss over the alcohol component because look, drinking alcohol is fun, right? If you're stressed out, a lot of people use it for stress management. A lot of people use it just to relax at the end of the day. A lot of people have this kind of false belief pattern that a glass of wine every night is somehow healthy for you. Look, alcohol is really not good for you. It damages your liver, it causes B vitamin deficiency, and alcohol feeds the wrong types of microbes in your GI tract. One of the things alcohol feeds aggressively is yeast, and it can create or contribute to yeast overgrowth for people. Look, we know yeast overgrowth is also a trigger for migraine headaches. So alcohol is one. If you're struggling with migraines, it's definitely one I encourage you to look at. And if you're an alcohol consumer on a regular basis, I'd look at cutting it out, see if your migraines don't improve. Trigger number 6, sinus problems. Like, there are a lot of things that can cause sinus problems. Many people have chronic sinus, upper sinus infections, in part because they have immune system dysfunction or immune system suppression. A lot of people struggle with sinus problems as a result of outdoor allergies, which was one of our earlier triggers that we talked about, but many people also have kind of what are known as stealth or hidden infections, and especially in humid climates, one of the more common types of infection that can colonize the sinus cavities is a mold infection or a mold overgrowth in the sinus cavities. Very, very common to see that. You can ask your doctor to rule that out with a simple nasal swab test. So if you're trying to determine whether or not you've got a problem in your sinus cavities that's contributing to or creating a migraine headache, ask your doctor to swab your nose and rule out mold infection. Now, something else that happens a lot of times that congests the sinuses is the indoor air pollution. So if you're inside your home and you're not filtering your house with HEPA filters, know that your body becomes the filter when you don't use a filter, right? So your nose is one of the biggest air filters that you have. And so sometimes what you breathe in, the indoor air contaminants, the volatile organic compounds that are released by paints and varnishes and furniture and carpets, those things your nose is now filtering, and that can create sinus disruption, that can create sinus compaction, which can also trigger migraine headaches. So filter your air in your house. It's easy to do. HEPA filter is the type of filter that you want to look for and prevent your nose from being that filter and lower your risk of developing migraine headaches. Okay, trigger number 7 is caffeine. Now, I know what you might be thinking. Some migraine medicines actually have caffeine in them. So a lot of people will actually take Excedrin with migraine or Excedrin for migraine, which has caffeine in it, to actually get some relief from migraine headaches. But caffeine can also be a trigger. As a stimulant, caffeine can stimulate adrenaline and noradrenaline production, and that in and of itself can neurologically stimulate a migraine headache. So if you're a heavy caffeine user, I'm not talking about small bouts of caffeine. I'm talking about, those of you know who you are. You drink 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 cups of coffee a day or tea a day, or popping energy drinks, or taking tablets like Vivarin to stay awake and study. Like, those are bad ideas if you're a migraine sufferer. You really want to look at your caffeine intake. My advice would be to eliminate it for a few months, get it out altogether. You'll go through some withdrawal headache, but once you get it out, you can rule it out as a trigger for yourself. Trigger number 8, talked about it earlier, dairy. Dairy is a common trigger. Now, a lot of people don't realize that, we said earlier that gluten is a trigger. Well, there's a protein in dairy called casein, especially in dairy produced in major industrialized areas where the cows produce what's called an A1 type of casein. Casein is the name of the protein found in dairy, and A1 casein particularly has been shown to mimic gluten. So there's this crossover between gluten and dairy and migraine triggers. Now, many dairy products also contain added quantities of hormones and other chemicals, things like microbial transglutaminase, aka meat glue, which is a known trigger, or can be a known trigger to disrupt the blood-brain barrier and the gastrointestinal barrier, creating leaky gut that leads to leaky brain and subsequently migraine headaches. So dairy is at the high end or the top end of the list of foods that can trigger migraine, and in my experience, it's a very, very common trigger. Trigger number 9, processed foods, for lots of different reasons. Processed foods oftentimes contain added sugars. They also contain added chemical compounds and preservatives. One in particular, MSG, monosodium glutamate. This is a notorious migraine trigger. If you've ever gone to a Chinese food restaurant, for example, the buffets, the Happy Lucky buffets, right? Those types of buffets are loaded with MSG. A lot of people that struggle with migraine, when they eat Chinese food that's loaded with MSG, they report an increased incidence of migraine headaches. So if you find yourself eating lots of processed food and there's lots of MSG in that food, I highly recommend you give it a rest, get the MSG out of your diet, and see what happens with your migraines. Trigger number 10, muscle aches, muscle spasms. A lot of you sit at a desk all day long, your head forward, choked over a computer, and your neck gets tight. The muscles in your neck get tense. Maybe your job is tense. Maybe driving through traffic, it contributes to that tenseness. Maybe having your neck and your eyes right up here next to a cell phone or a personal device creates that tension. Or maybe just a lack of exercise creates such a muscle weakness in your posterior chain that your muscles are constantly under tension because they're too weak to keep your head held up high. So those of you who have chronic muscle aches and pains, understand that those pains can actually, those types of tension headaches can actually lead to triggering migraine headaches. It's not that they're a direct cause, but once a tension headache sets in from muscle tightness, it tends to lead to the progression toward migraine headaches. So if you struggle with that, there are a number of different things that you can do. Number one, check your screen time, right? Minimize your screen time, preserve your neck. Number two, exercise. Exercise increases your muscular strength, especially exercising your posterior chain. That's the muscles along the back, right? The muscle along the back of the neck, your back, your buttocks, and your legs. That's your posterior chain. Making sure those muscles are strong and making sure that they're flexible, in essence stretching, so not just exercise and strengthening, but also stretching will go a long way toward helping you navigate what you have to do the rest of your day, the rest of your week when you're sitting at a computer desk for your job or whatever that is that you're required to do. So, stretching and exercise go a long way toward relieving that muscle ache, that muscle pain. So make sure you take advantage of that simple and free tip. Trigger number 11, stress. Stress is a big one, and there are lots of different types of stress. As a matter of fact, stress comes in three main flavors. You've got physical stress, you've got chemical stress, and you've got emotional stress, right? So where's your stress coming from? Emotional stress comes from relationships, it comes from the people that you hang out with, it comes from the self-talk that you have in your own mind about yourself. So, a lot of people do meditation, a lot of people do self-awareness or mindfulness to help relieve or reduce their emotional stress. And those are great things. You should be doing them. Additionally, there's chemical stress. Now, chemical stress comes from a lot of the other triggers we've been talking about. Food is a chemical stress. Environmental allergens, environmental pollutants, these are all forms of chemical stress. Chemicals are things that come into your body, right, that can alter your biochemistry. So mitigate your forms of chemical stress by making sure that you're eating right. Mitigate your stress by making sure you're sleeping well. Go to bed on time, wake up after a good solid 7 or 8 hours. Don't go to bed late, wake up early. That doesn't go well for your stress. It doesn't bode well for your stress. So mitigate that stress with lots of extra sleep, lots of exercise. Mitigate it by taking good care of yourself, by feeding your body what it needs and filtering the air and the water, and mitigate that stress by selectively choosing who you hang out with and make sure those aren't the people that are drawing you down and bringing you down. Migraine trigger number 12, sugar. Sugar's a big one. Most people eat sugar on a daily basis, whether that's sugar in your tea, sugar in your soda, sugar in your food. If you eat out at restaurants, know that they're pumping sugar into your food. One of the tricks of the restaurant industry is to soak your salad leaf in sugar water. It makes it taste sweeter and makes you want to go back and eat their salad more frequently. So sugar's a notorious and insidious and ubiquitous compound that people are exposed to on a daily basis. And aside from contributing to cancer, heart disease, diabetes, and a plethora of other forms of autoimmune disease, sugar's also a migraine trigger. My tip on sugar, don't eat it, avoid it. If you want sugar, eat something that's natural sugar. A piece of fruit, for example, would go a long way toward somebody's sweet tooth versus, let's say, a stick of licorice candy. So avoid the candy, avoid the sweets, avoid the migraines. Next one on the list, artificial sweeteners. Now, if you've got a really sweet tooth and you're avoiding sugar, like I just said, avoid the sugar, and you're going toward the artificial sweeteners, the Splenda, the NutraSweet, the aspartame, the sucralose, Look, bad idea. There's a lot of research that shows that these artificial sweeteners can actually trigger migraine headaches as well, especially aspartame. So, you know, aside from artificial sweeteners spiking insulin, spiking blood sugar, and creating weight gain, even though they're supposed to be non-caloric, they still create the same types of problems that sugar can create, but they also come along with neurological damage, and that's a bad idea. So avoid the artificial sweeteners if you want to avoid the migraine headaches. Now earlier I talked about processed food and I mentioned MSG, and MSG makes that list, right? MSG is a major trigger for migraine headaches. So aside from processed foods, you might find MSG in certain seasonings, barbecue sauces, salad dressings, meat rubs. If you do any kind of barbecuing and you use any kinds of herbs or spices in your kitchen, especially like multi-blends, where it's a mixture of different types of herbs, check your labels, folks, because a lot of those have hidden MSGs in them. So if you see the word glutamate or monosodium glutamate on a food package and you're a migraine sufferer, you know, put the package down and find an ulterior option. Okay, last on the list, don't hate me for saying it, especially ladies out there who love your chocolate. But chocolate can be a major, major trigger for migraine headaches. A lot of people find that the chocolate, one of the ingredients in chocolate is actually caffeine, and we said earlier that caffeine can be a migraine trigger. But chocolate has a couple of other chemicals in it that can also trigger migraine headaches. So again, if you're struggling with migraine, you don't know why, you gotta look at chocolate as a potential and get it out of the diet. So if you avoid, again, the summary, if you avoid all of these 16 triggers, look, take the challenge, avoid these triggers for the next 3 months. Monitor the quantity, the frequency, and the intensity of your migraine headaches. And if you just don't notice a reduction, then you can call me wrong. But pretty much every time I've seen somebody come visit me in my clinic and they've attempted this migraine relief activity, it's very, very rare that we see it fail. The only time actually that we see it fail is if somebody has a unique food allergy that we haven't tested for or that we haven't identified yet. So attempt avoiding these 16 things and you might just see your migraine headaches go away. This is Dr. Osborne wishing you excellent health. We'll see you in the next video.